If you've ever run ads and watched clicks come in, but no one actually reaches out, or worse, the leads that you do get are price shoppers and tire kickers who just waste 2 hours of your time just to tell you that they're still considering other options and getting 3 other quotes, then you start wondering if ads are even worth it. Maybe you've tried, boosting posts or hiring an agency, but all you ended up with was just wasted time and wasted money. So now you're probably thinking that Facebook ads just doesn't work for your type of business. But the truth is that it's not that ads don't work. It's about how your message actually lands with the homeowners and people that you are trying to attract. I've used Facebook ads to turn over 2,000 complete strangers into booked appointments and sales paying customers. And so in this video, I'm going to walk through how I write 6-figure ad scripts and basically make the right people stop, pay attention, and ultimately reach out so that you can apply some of the same principles to your ads, allowing you to ultimately grow your business and get a better return on your ad spend. So let's get right into it. Now, what I have in front of me here is a research brief about who I'm trying to attract, what their current situation is, their problem, what they want, and some other context about the competition. And this stuff is probably what determines about 80% of your marketing success. Before you write a single word, if you don't know ultimately who you're trying to attract, what their current situation is, what their dreams are, then you can be a good writer in terms of the text sounds good, it looks good, it's conversational. However, if it doesn't land, if people don't resonate with it, if it doesn't make them feel something, then ultimately you don't capture attention and you don't get the sale. And so I would highly advise, if you haven't already, getting really specific on the ideal client that you want to attract. And maybe you can go through previous homeowners and clients that you have served and come up with who were the actual best clients. Like, who were they? What type of person were they? What situation were they in? What type of home did they live in? Did they have a family? Did they have a specific job? Why did they want to get the build that they wanted to get? Why did they want to build the outdoor space that they wanted? And what made them a good client? Was there something about their personality? Like, you can start going through who your ideal clients are just based on sort of your experience. However, if your experience isn't sort of enough to give you a very clear picture, then you can do some research online. You can do some research with AI, and you can even interview your past clients and just ask them like, hey, we did this project for you. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions about what made you decide to do this project specifically? What made you want to go with us? And at first, they're probably going to give you surface level answers. And so that's when you sort of have to ask the deeper questions. Like, oh, I wanted my backyard to be this way. Oh, why was that important to you? And that's how we can get to the deeper level stuff. And I'm going to show you why that's important. And so in front of me, I have this sort of research brief, and this I created with AI. Now I have a bunch of prompts for research and stuff like that took a long time to actually create. So you probably won't get something like this right away. This is just an example that I wanted to have for this video specifically. But here's what we're doing today and the type of business that we are. So we are elite outdoor living company. That's our business, right? It's made up, obviously, right? And we do custom pergolas, outdoor kitchens, and patio builds. And the average project is between $35,000 to $85,000. We are located in Texas, and the target radius is 25 miles. Now, here's who our ideal client is. It's a male homeowner. He's 42 years old. He runs his own business or is in some, senior management role, and works hard, earns well, And his home is one of the clearest signals of that success, right? However, he's got a large backyard that's basically just been sitting unused for 3 years. And every summer he tells his wife that we need to do something about that space. And so you can see that we're getting pretty specific on the type of person that we want to attract. And the more specific you can get, the more you know about their situation and their day-to-day life, the more specific and hyper-targeted your ads can become. Because one of the biggest mistakes is trying to reach everyone with your ads at once, because a vague generic message reaches no one, right? And so there's a saying in marketing, and maybe you've heard it: if you try to reach everyone, if you try to attract everyone, you attract no one. And it's because your messaging just gets very surface level, right? And so we are getting very specific now on who we are trying to attract. And the thing that is good about, for example, Facebook ads is that you don't need to target the same exact profile on every ad, right? You can make 10 different ads, each one having sort of 10 different angles. But the point is that each ad should have a very specific person or angle in mind and not be broad, right? So I hope that makes sense. Now, when we dive a little bit deeper into what's actually going on with our ideal client here, we're also going to see that we're getting very specific and we're getting a very good understanding of where he is. So, you know, it's 7 p.m. on a Friday. He just closed the deal. Good week. Pulls into the driveway, walks through the house, grabs a beer, slides open the back door, and there it is. You know, a flat concrete slab, a rusted Weber grill that he's had since 2019, plastic chairs that don't match, and a half-dead patch of grass his kids stopped playing on 2 summers ago, right? You can see that this is very visual, right? You can picture this scene in front of you. And that is ultimately the right problems to target. I had a mentor of mine once said, and it's very genius, that if the problem isn't visual, then it's not worth going after. Because when people think about their problem and what they're going through, they're not thinking in terms of these very sort of vague feelings, right? They're not thinking in terms of, hey, I'm unhappy with my backyard. That's not the conversation that they're having with themselves in their mind. They are thinking this type of stuff, their lived experiences, right? They're thinking about, damn, these plastic chairs just look so, you know, doesn't match my success. And if they have 3 plastic chairs that don't match and you write that in their ad, like, you're entering into their world and they can clearly see that you understand their situation and where they are. And that's ultimately what makes people consume. That's what grabs their attention, and that's what builds the connection that makes them trust you, right? So in this video, for example, I opened up the video talking about your situation, right? And I tried to describe it in a very specific way, even a very visual way, where I talked about how you may drive out to, you know, people and spend time with them for 2 hours just for them to tell you that they're still considering options, right? That's a scene that you can picture, right? And the same thing goes for the people that you're trying to attract, right? And so, yeah, this is just a little bit more about him, but we'll skip over it. And the same thing goes also when it comes to what he ultimately wants, okay? So we're making it visual. We're trying to imagine this dream island that he wants to be on, right? He wants to host. He's imagining a Saturday evening in July, steaks on a built-in grill, his buddy sitting around with a beer, his wife actually relaxed because the space looks and functions well. He wants his neighbors to walk past and notice, right? We're not saying, for example, he wants to build his dream outdoor space or an outdoor space that he loves. We're getting way more specific on what his dream outdoor space is. What is the space that he will love, right? And this is how we get from the surface to hyper-targeted ads that basically pierce people's hearts, right? And that's what we want to do. And we even get to things that keep him up at night. So he's seen his neighbor hire a contractor who showed up for 2 weeks, disappeared for a month, and finished the job looking nothing like the original design. He's heard the stories, right? And so these are the fears that are holding him back from actually pulling the trigger, right? Now, when we know our audience, something that I think is very important is also knowing what your competitors are offering, okay? Because when you see where your ideal client is and their problem and what they want, you will also see the gaps that your competitors aren't capitalizing on or aren't actually filling. And so you may see, for example, that they are just talking about premium outdoor living spaces and no one is addressing, this fear that he has, okay? And then you can start to think about, okay, well, how can I fill that gap? How can I capitalize on this gap that my competitors aren't, right? And this is when we also get into the offer, because we want the offer to fill that gap that no one else is filling. And so if, for example, he has this fear that he's going to spend, a lot of money for an outdoor space that's either not going to be done properly, or the guy is just going to disappear, or, they're not going to finish on time and he's just going to have a plow down backyard sitting idle for, weeks and he can't get a hold of the contractor. If no one is talking about that or building their offer around that, then that's something that you can very easily capitalize on. So then you can, for example, say, we'll build your outdoor kitchen or pergola in 8 weeks, exactly the way you approved it, or we'll discount your project by $2,500, right? Now, this wouldn't be the full ad, but this is the thing that we would write the ad around, right? Now that we know the audience, we know the gap, we can now build an offer that actually capitalizes on it, that is desirable, that has a specific outcome, and a risk reversal that removes a lot of the fear too, right? And if you would do this, right, if this was true and the gap that I talked about was also true in your market, and you made an offer like this, like, you will crush. You don't even need amazing ad copy at that point. Like, you will crush because you've already done 80% of the work that will make your ads scale. The offer and the context around the offer is crucial. Nothing works in isolation, right? It's always in relationship to something, a specific gap, a fear, a problem that no one else is actually capitalizing on or talking about, right? I know we're getting very tactical, but I hope that makes sense. And so you can also see that the offer isn't this, list of services that we do. It's a very specific outcome. It's a specific outcome with a time frame backed into it and a risk reversal. This is ultimately how we actually stand out, because if you just have a list of services, man, everyone else is just listing their services and talking about how good they are. But if you are just a list of services, then you become a commodity. And this is also one of the biggest reasons why people don't attract enough leads, or the right leads, where people are always comparing them or saying that, yeah, we're just waiting for other quotes, is because they just see you as a list of services. But when you have a very specific outcome and even backed up with a risk reversal, then it becomes very hard to compete with, especially if no one else is doing it. So I hope that makes sense. And when you have this information, when you have this plan, now we can start actually writing. And so that's what we're going to do next. Now, mind you, I haven't actually started the copy yet. I don't have anything pre-written. I will just be writing this from scratch, and I might go back and forth between, the research a little bit here, just to make sure that I write something that will actually advance the sale, right? And so for my hook, and now the point of the hook, right, is to just grab their attention. We want to grab their attention, and we want to make them read the next sentence. And the goal of the next sentence, the purpose of it, is to make them read the next sentence, and we want to get them into this sort of slippery slope. And the reason the hook is so important is because, and this was something established a very long time ago by some very, legendary copywriters, is that 80% of your budget goes into the headline, or in other words, the first thing that people see, in this case the hook, because 80% of the people who read the hook, who read the first sentence, will not continue reading. And so the hook, the first part of your sales message, is the most important thing. And so we really want to make sure that we get the hook right, and also that we're testing a lot of hooks in our ads. So we may, for example, have a lot of different body copies, but with 10 different hooks, right? And we test all of them. So when it comes to the hook here, I'll just write something pretty simple. So I just came up with something. So maybe I will write something like successful men in Texas. All most successful men in Texas suffer from the same thing. So now I've written a hook here, and the reason I wrote it like this is because most successful men in Dallas Fort Worth, it gets pretty specific on who we are actually talking to, right? And so our guy, our 42-year-old business owner, male homeowner, will probably see this and get a little bit curious, because we're getting pretty specific, right? Now, we probably won't say, most successful men who are 42 years old and, lives at this exact address. Like, we can't go that specific, but we're getting pretty specific, right? And so specificity attracts attention, right? And they suffer from the same thing. We're sort of like hinting at some type of problem, but we're not explicitly saying what it is yet. Again, this sort of just builds curiosity, and it follows the guidelines that I mentioned earlier about the hook being the thing that will allow us to capture the attention. Our goal is to capture attention and make people consume our message, right? So the suffer from the same thing, it's sort of vaguely, like this is sort of vaguely specific, right? Like, what am I suffering from? And then we might get into talking about his specific situation and where we know he is in terms of the life he's living and the problem that he's suffering from. And this is to create that connection and make him feel seen, make him feel like we are speaking exactly, like directly to him, right? And this will earn the trust, and this will earn the consumption. And so we may say, so they built the life most others could only dream of, the career, the family, the home. However, and this is, the turning point. When we get into the pain and the problem we know that they're feeling, right? They feel this tension. The fact that they have this successful life, but their backyard isn't actually living up to it, right? And so we can continue on this and get specific about their backyard and why they're unhappy with it. The plastic shares that, or we can say the sheep plastic shares that, or we might honestly just say the sheep plastic shares. We may come up with things later too, and that's also one thing to keep in mind, is that you don't need to make a perfect first draft, like on the first try. Honestly, a lot of the goodness in an ad comes after you've written it and when you start editing, because you'll probably make a first draft, go through the research a little bit, or you may walk away from the computer for a while, and when you've walked away, you start getting like some ideas. Your brain, starts actually like digesting what you've been writing, and ideas start to pop up, etc. And so we don't need to get it perfect on the first run here. So for now, I'll just leave it at the sheep plastic shares. They still have the sheep plastic shares. A big patch of grass that's mostly empty and almost dried out. Oh, a rustic grill would be nice. There. A rustic grill they bought 5 years ago. From what store could you buy just a basic grill from? From, I don't know. I know Costco is a store in America, so let's just write that. That they hide from guests. Oof, that's a good one. So, now we can see that we're getting very clear and very specific on who we're trying to attract, the situation that they're in, and ultimately just the problem that they're living, right? Now we can sort of get into why haven't they actually solved this problem. Honestly, in some cases we might even go a little bit deeper, because even though this is their situation, we haven't built a lot of like tension, emotional tension, in other words, like pain. This is a little bit, right? It's something that they hide from guests, like they're embarrassed. And notice that I didn't say embarrassed. It came into my mind, but instead of saying that this grill, you're embarrassed to show it off, I describe how that feeling actually shows up in their life, like how it manifests. Well, it manifests as they hide the grill from their guest, right? They don't want people to see it. Now here, we'll probably just make a little sort of turning point here and start speaking directly to the reader, because if you can notice, we've said they here. And I did it here because sometimes you don't want to directly say to someone that you have this problem. It can come off as pretty presumptuous. And so instead, we sort of let people qualify themselves, right? So if they've read this far, then they obviously have the problem. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reading. And that's also a thing about getting high quality leads, filtering out the wrong people, is that you can do that by targeting the right problems. If your ideal client has a very specific problem, chances are someone who is not your ideal client doesn't have that problem. So when you describe the problem, your ideal client is the person who will feel seen, who will consume, and the person who is not your ideal client will not feel seen, will not consume. And that's the point, right? So it acts as a filtering system as well. And so now let's actually turn it back to the reader. We can just say, sound familiar? And in their mind, if they go yes, then we can just keep going, right? If so, you've probably thought about doing something about your backyard for 3 summers, or perhaps more, but you haven't pulled the trigger because heard the contractor horror stories from other homeowners, and from, let's say, maybe we can even say neighbors. One who paid way more than initially quoted. The one who, I want to say something about timeline. I want to say something about the fact that they heard stories about, contractors not finishing on time. The one who had their backyard in crumbles for let's say 6 months. Something like that, right? So now we're describing just like, why hasn't he pulled the trigger? And this is also to make way for our offer and our solution right? We've described their problem. Now we're getting into, well, we know why you haven't taken action, right? These are the reasons. And so the goal later, or the point later, is to then position our offer as a solution to this, right? And this is where, the specific outcome comes in with the specific timeline and guarantee, right? To handle all of those fears or those obstacles that prevent people from taking action. Not alone, but that's why, let's say we have some social proof. Let's say 1,000 plus homeowners around Dallas, because we'll build outdoor. Now I'm considering how I can flame the desire. I know what he wants. He has the picture in his head, which was this, right? He's imagining a Saturday evening in July, steak on built grills, right? So I want to keep this in mind now for when we are getting into the solution, because again, one thing to keep in mind is that people don't buy, services or products. They buy solutions and they buy dreams, right? And so we always want to connect our service or whatever our offer is to their dreams, right? And also, why it's important to dig into the problem here is that it creates contrast between the problem that they're suffering from and the dream that they want to achieve. It's like, okay, you're on Hell Island right now. Here's what Hell Island looks like. But you can be on Heaven Island. And the contrast, the emotional tension between where they are and where they want to be is what makes people pull the trigger. So now I'm just considering how I can weave in the desire. If I should do it somehow before introducing the company or after. And you're not alone. Say, over 1,000, I would probably specify the city, so Dallas, Fort Worth. Homeowners who worked with us felt the same thing. They wanted an outdoor space. And now let's go into the desire here again. And now, for example, when I'm at the end of the copy here and I'm thinking about the dreams and desires, I'm getting ideas for the problem here. Because again, people don't buy products or services, they buy solutions. But they don't buy solutions to a problem that they're not feeling. And so what they want is, this type of these evenings on Saturdays in July where his kids are playing around, his neighbors walk past and notice, stuff like that, right? And so I'm thinking about, his kids. So they still have plastic and a big patch of grass that's mostly empty, half dead grass. Their kids are never playing in. Right. Again, making the problem visual. So they have the sheet plastic chairs. Cookouts. They make cookouts a hassle. That's a little bit vague, but I'm getting the idea here. So again, you don't need to make it perfect the first time. So now I have the problem, I think, way better defined. And so when I get into the desires here at the end of the ad copy, it's going to be way better contrasted with the problem. The hard-earned success they've built in life. They wanted an outdoor space that made their kids play more outside rather than inside. That will make them. Okay, this is a little off. We'll rewrite and ultimately match the hard-earned success that we built in life. That they've built in life. So again, very specific visual desires and dreams here, right? It's not build an outdoor space that you'll love. It's not build the outdoor space of your dreams. It's getting very specific on what they want the space for. For cookouts. I might even do bullets here. So the reason I felt like having the outdoor space here would be, you know, a little bit clunky. Right now I'm just trying to, again, like paint the dream, and then I'm going to connect the dream to our offer, right? So if you want this lived experience, if you want to be on Heaven Island, then we have this offer for you, right? They wanted their kids to play out more outside rather than inside. They wanted to have their kids play more outside rather than inside, and to feel excited to have guests over for cookouts. Is cookouts one word? I think so, right? Yeah, I think it's one word. Okay. They wanted to have their kids play more outside rather than inside, feel excited to have guests over for cookouts, and ultimately, this doesn't sound good now. Have a home and home matches the success they built. But so now I'm tying this back to the fear here. I want to be let down by, but found a contractor they can trust. Now how can we tie in the offer here? Let's just say and have a backyard that matches the success they built to help them. We understand that concern. That's why we'll build, let's just have this down here so I can reference it easily. Exactly the way you approved it. We'll honestly might even go bigger with the sort of risk averse. I would say like $5,000. Exactly the way you approved it. Might just say this combined with a luxurious reading area. So either you get the outdoor living space in other words, we don't make a profit or something like that. So this sort of just sets high stakes almost, like the stakes are on you, the risk is on you. Like you need to give them, you build them what they want, or like you don't make money, like you're not in business almost, right? So it's a way of just illustrating the risk you are taking with this offer. And then I would just go to the call to action. So let's say we're doing like a lead form, and we're asking people to fill out some information, then we'll contact them very quickly with, you know, to discuss their project. Your outdoor. details and will reach out to you. Reach out, let's say within 1 hour to discuss your project. Honestly, if you ran this ad or this was like a script of yours, this will probably crush. You might do some slight editing still, but for the most part, I think this would crush. And for the call to action here, we make it very clear what we want them to do and what is going to happen next. And so a lot of the times people sort of butcher their call to action, and they may say, book a consultation, but they don't tell the reader how to book a consultation or where or what is going to happen when they do. And so people just get confused and they don't do anything. And so we want to be very clear about what we want them to do and what is going to happen next. That's also called future pacing, where you tell them what's going to happen next, especially if you have like links in the copy. Like, people are afraid of clicking because they don't know what to expect. People don't like surprises, right? This is one of the reasons, for example, that people don't like upsells, because it usually comes as a surprise. But if you tell them what to expect, what's coming in the future, then people don't get surprised. They don't get mad with, for example, upsells, or, they don't get confused when they land on the website. So now the ad is basically finished. I would maybe do some editing here and there, but for the most part, like 95% of this, maybe 90% is basically done. So I would probably test a bunch of different hooks. Actually, one thing that I forgot is a headline. So obviously the headline is on the bottom of the ad. And one thing to keep in mind about headlines is that, or at least this is the way I think about it, I don't want to build too much curiosity in the headline. And the reason is because if I build too much curiosity, then people might just click out of curiosity. And that's how you get low intent clicks, low intent leads. I want people to click out of intent. Okay, so I might do something like build the outdoor space your success deserves, or something. But again, I would also test different headlines. But with this headline, for example, I'm going into like what it is. I'm not saying something that is very broad or vague like in the hook here, right? If I said this in the headline, I would get a bunch of clicks that are probably very low intent, because when they read this, they don't fully know what is going to be in the ad yet. And if I have that in the headline and they get to a page or a lead form that asks for a budget, they're going to be very confused. So it's very incongruent, right? So in the headline, I want to talk about, basically mention the outcome or what I'm actually doing. And that way I don't get these sort of low intent clicks. For the most part, this is like ready to run. If you would run an ad where you have this script, then I think this ad would crush. Now, if you just want me to write, produce, and manage your meta ads for you, so that you can turn 8 to 12 homeowners who have no idea who you are into referral quality consultations in just 90 days for projects starting at $50,000 on a pay-per-consultation basis, then what you can do is that you can book a call with me by clicking the Calendly link in the description of this video. Pick a time that works for you. Goodbye.